Everyone, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call together the March 2nd, 2023 school committee meeting. If you would join by standing with me and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Easy. Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This evening we have a consent agenda posted. We also have the minutes from our February 9th, 2023 meeting and oath to bills and payroll. Is there a motion to accept?
There is. I move to accept the minutes from February 9th and the oath to bills and payroll.
A motion made by Mr. Austin.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Marius. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The audience's education, Jen Gold's is remote, so not in the room but with us. This is our first opportunity for interested citizens. So if there's anyone in the room that would like to speak before the school committee, if there's anyone on Zoom that wishes to address the school committee, this is your first opportunity. All right. Great. We will now pause and for our recognition portion of the meeting, and we will hear from our student representative, John Feltus.
Right. Hello, my name is John Feltus. I'm the student representative for Littleton Schools. I have some updates to give. At the Shaker Lane, despite the snow day on Tuesday, students and staff have settled back into school after the February break, and they are looking forward to several weeks of learning before April break. Tomorrow night, the Shaker. I don't know if that's the right tomorrow. But the Shaker Lane and the Russell Street look forward to their virtual dance party organized. Organized by the PTA. It has been well attended for the past 2 years. And at the Russell Street, they had a great transition back into school after the break. And they also look forward to the virtual dance party. And they would like to thank the Russell Street and Shaker Lane PTA for sponsoring the event. At the middle school, the 8th graders are beginning their class selection with a visit at the high school next Friday. And the 6th grade has their kids' night out on Friday, March 24th, and more details are to come about that. And at the high school, the junior auction is today from 5 to 8 p.m. and the college fair is scheduled for Wednesday, March 15th from 6:30 to 8 p.m.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Dr.
Clench, you have great.
Just a few. Congratulations to our varsity boys ice hockey team who claimed their first sectional championship ever.
Wow.
That's how exciting that is. And also congratulations to our indoor track team who had a number of athletes that took state titles. So another very impressive showing. And tonight I attended the LHS junior silent auction. Lots of good things to win, so to speak. So if you haven't been there yet, I'm sure you get out there tonight and stay away from everything that I put my number in. I should probably tell you my number so you can stay away, but I won't. They had a raffle there as well, and I have to say, Ed's Weenies, it was a tough competition, I'll tell you. 15 tickets in, and then I looked beside me with a colleague from central office who I won't name at this time. She was about 40 tickets in there. It was a sheet. So if I win, I'm going to really rub it in. Tickets.
There's going to be 2 winners.
That's true. We're good. We're both going to win, right?
One of my 6 is going to win.
And speaking of indoor track, our indoor track coach, Casey Keldenberg, was one of the coaches that was honored for Coach of the Year from MSTCA. So there are about 6 or 7 coaches throughout the state. We're doing well this winter season.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much.
And
Girls basketball tournament tomorrow night. Is that right?
Tomorrow night.
o'clock. Yeah.
Great. Good. Okay. We will get started with our presentation portion of the evening. We have a presentation prepared to members of the DEI club here this evening. Students of the Littleton High School DEI Club will present to the school committee about religious holidays. We've reserved about 10 minutes for this time slot. I'll provide a little bit of framework here. So the DEI Club presented last year. Last year at that time, the school calendar was currently observing 2 religious holidays. There was a nice student-led initiative here to recognize and add a 3rd religious holiday, which was Diwali. That was an easy decision. It was a unanimous vote. The school committee has been looking at the school calendar, start times, start date, religious holidays, half days, a number of topics. And Brad and I visited with the DEI Club. It's probably about a month ago, right? Thereabouts. And just wanted to touch base with the club, get some feedback, which we certainly did. And they asked us if they could join us here this evening for a presentation. And the answer, of course, was of course. So if you would make your way to the microphone, and if you want to start just by introducing yourselves, and then you can go through the presentation. Does that sound good? Great.
Could I ask you guys to? Thank you.
And Dorothy, we don't, because it's a student group, we don't need addresses for the public record. I was thinking, yeah, so just, yeah.
I'm Mark Rohr. I'm a senior at Littleton High.
I'm Aria Watchcenter. I'm a freshman. Giselle Kernan, I'm a junior. Rachel Friedman, I'm a senior.
Yep.
Okay, so here's our proposal to keep the religious holidays on the LPS student calendar, and here's our mission statement. It says to ensure that Littleton does not take a step back in terms of inclusivity, school committee members should vote to resume the affirmation of religious observances through district-wide holidays.
All right, here's just some demographics and statistics. So we kind of touched base on this last year, but over the past 10 years, the enrollment of Asian students has gone from 4% to 14.7%. Like, we understand that not all Asians are ones who celebrate Diwali, and we're also talking about a number of other holidays, but that's just a statistic that's at the top of it. And that's almost a 400% increase, which is a huge number. And this is around 242 Asian students across the LPS school system right now.
All right, so one major topic which we want to talk about is mental health and stress. And so one of the biggest concerns for many students, especially at Littleton High School, is mental health and being able to properly manage the stress of extracurriculars and academics. We believe that it's completely unfair for students to have to choose their religion versus school, especially as being forced to choose one or the other could result in stress and or conflict. For example, if a child chooses to go to school instead of staying home on that holiday, the child misses out on an opportunity to celebrate their faith with their family and engage in practices. I mean, imagine not being able to celebrate Christmas, which we all know is federally supported, but imagine not being able to celebrate a holiday like that, significance with your family. For example, for Christmas, if you were to miss that holiday, you'd miss opening presents with your kids and having like a nice Christmas dinner and other little things that we do with holidays like that. It's the same situation here, of course, just different practices and activities. However, on the flip side, if a child misses school to stay home on the holiday, the child can potentially suffer academically, miss out on learning opportunities, and possibly feel socially isolated from their schoolmates. Simply put, it's a very difficult choice for students who want to practice their religion, but also feel caught up with their work. Furthermore, being able to have this day off from school to participate in holiday activities eliminates this worry for students and can even benefit non-religious students. For those who don't observe the holiday, this time could be taken to catch up on work, de-stress, regroup, possibly socialize with friends, and maybe even engage in activities that they wouldn't traditionally be able to do on the school day. In both cases, it's very clear that it's beneficial to the mental health of students to have these days off. And although there's the worry of childcare and other consequences, which we will discuss further in this presentation, we DEI Club have found that many of our peers and a large percentage of the student body at LHS find the removal of these holidays is unnecessary. They too have found the days to help regroup, catch up on work, and relax. What's also special about these holidays is especially in the time we are in now, where anti-Semitism and prejudice is on the rise, is that we have the opportunity to take time to learn more about these holidays and to educate ourselves about different cultures. Whether this be by researching fun facts, reading through infographics on social media, which are very prevalent now, especially like on Instagram, or just learning from those who celebrate through our friends, maybe even family. It allows us to have an excellent opportunity for those who want to learn more, but maybe couldn't as a result of having that day of school.
So we understand that there may be concern over lack of childcare options, but we believe that this worry shouldn't be as prevalent in the minds of parents. I mean, the school calendar comes out about half a year in advance to the beginning of the school year. So this is plenty of time for many parents to make arrangements for their child. Not only that, the Tiger's Den and Park and Rec childcare from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. is open most days, and it's open on all these religious holidays besides Good Friday. LHS also puts up job/volunteering opportunities in their lobby so students can see if they want to babysit for someone. And Littleton is a very tight-knit community, and online parent-run group chats can be an easy way to see if a child can spend a day with a friend or a family. That's kind of our.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'll say that, on our agenda this evening is an old business item, which is discussion and potential vote of religious holidays, which has been scheduled for following meeting. But since we just had a presentation, I'd like to ask if there are any school committee members that have questions or comments of the DEI club.
No, I mean, I appreciate you guys presenting and giving us your perspective. It's really important for us to have your perspective on this. Just the thought of, like you said, not being able to celebrate Christmas. It's never anything that I've ever had to make that decision to do. So it's just important to kind of highlight that you guys are put in that position, what kind of a burden that is for you. So I really appreciate your input on that. Thank you.
I've asked you a lot of questions before, and I just thanks for being here. Thanks for advocacy last year. Thanks for taking time to meet with Justin and me earlier, and really appreciate this. I said before, one of the, like I said, in one of the last meetings, one of the ways to really end up being impressed with the education Littleton provides is seeing the advocacy of the students, and thank you for that.
Yeah, I echo that as well. There's nothing better as a school committee member than hearing from students themselves. So I want to thank you guys for being here. It's a topic I can assure you that's got our full attention and the attention of quite a few residents. It's been a little while since we've been getting blasted with emails on topics, and this is certainly one that has got the inbox chiming again. So that being said, Vinal's back next week. Jen, although she's remote, she'll be in the room next week, and we plan to discuss this topic at length and potentially, if there's a motion, put it to a vote. So thank you very much. Thanks, guys. All right. Somewhat related topic, but we'll move on to new business item number 1, which is the draft sneak peek of the 2023-2024 school calendar. I'll just make note that this is an initial review. Again, when all school committee members will be present next week, I think that might be the more appropriate time to have an at-length discussion, but then, and hopefully we can come to an agreement and there's a vote. But certainly as the information gets presented tonight, if we have questions, great to try to flush them out. So. Okay.
Perfect. Any questions? I kind of caught Brad there for a second, dude.
Oh, you've met me. I have questions. One thing just to clarify for the committee members
Sure.
and for the community is that this draft schedule is based on kind of status quo continued, right? This is based on the current contract and current expectations.
Yeah, based on the current parameters that,
Yeah.
that we've followed in previous years.
You going? Or
Yeah, so I didn't know if you were gonna walk us through the
Oh,
calendar. Or
I could.
or not. I mean, like, this is the first day, this is the last
Yeah.
day, here are
I
the.
can do that. I didn't want to draw too much attention to it because we're gonna have a robust conversation next meeting, but quickly I can go through it with the parameters that we've used. First teacher day is September 5th. First student day is September 6th. If we do not use any snow days next year, the last day of school would be June 18th. If we use 5 snow days, the last day would be June 25th. And the only other thing that we did is we moved all but one PD day to Wednesday. We've been hearing from parents and our elementary administration and staff, the Fridays are for staff aren't as good because of the way our specials are run in the elementary schools. From parents, we're hearing again about the idea of a consistent day so that they can make arrangements and have a consistent schedule to follow, which is easy for them to remember. It's easier to obtain childcare if they do need it. Other than that, everything else is the same unless you have any other questions.
I mean, I know we're gonna talk about this more next meeting and hopefully vote it through so families can get organized for the following year, but I mean, I did have a couple questions. So there is that one Friday where we have the half day. It's the Friday before Memorial Day. Is there a particular reason that was on the calendar this year as well? Maybe it was even last year. Is there a particular reason why we choose to do a professional development day on that Friday alone and we don't do them on any other one?
Well, we had experimented with this a few years ago, I think 4 years ago, and we just thought we'd leave one in just so that we had some data
Okay.
to continue to look at. So, I mean, it's Wednesday seems to be a day that works well, but we did try some Fridays this year. It was okay in terms of attendance. I'm not going to rave about the attendance. There was a noticeable difference. Not as much with students, but with staff on that day in terms of attendance on Fridays. I'm sure absences were all for good reasons, but we did notice an increase in absences on those 2 Fridays. You know, the part of the premise, though, to bring greater consistency to the calendar for families, as we've been hearing, it resulted in, you know, one of the criteria we used was to do what we could to create greater consistency for our families. And it's not uncommon. I've heard this many times in my career designing calendars. We've tried various days, and in the end, most situations people like consistency. They like to know when it is throughout the year, and it makes sense. Going back when I had young children at home, I love that kind of consistency where I could, pick a Wednesday twice a month, and I knew I needed childcare during those days when they were young.
My other easy question is, because we heard from so many people about the religious holiday things, and you were copied on many of the emails, everyone, that's the wrong word, many folks seem to address like a displeasure with the amount of half days that are in the calendar. And I know that those 12 professional half days are in the contract right now. That's why we have them. I just wanted it to be known for the record that we've heard from the community. We recognize that that's a challenge. I do think that there's some language in the current contract that I've reviewed that would allow us to potentially look for a change for the following school year. We would just need to notify the teachers union of a desire, if it was your recommendation to have a couple less half days or something like that. There is an opportunity in there to try to address it for the following school year, because one of the drawbacks to the process is we're looking to publish a calendar before we're able to negotiate the next contract.
Right.
So we're essentially going to have the third, I don't know what the first year of the contract was like, if it was like the previous contract, but essentially the current contract is going to spill over to next year.
Right.
And I just wanted to bring to the school committee's attention that there is some language in the contract that would allow us to potentially, serve the union a written notice. They'd have 10 days to respond. We can meet and talk about it. Of course, that would have to happen very quickly because we're looking to publish a calendar in the next 7 to 14 days, I think.
I mean, one thing we need to remember, we can give them notice, but we would be obligated to negotiate if they felt it was a change in working conditions. So it's not a slam dunk. So to speak.
Of course not, but at least I think it starts the conversation.
We already have started the conversation as well, as you know,
yeah, you're right.
so.
Yeah. I guess my thought process is the conversation we're having now is in effect until 18 months from now,
Right.
it seems less important. If we could have a conversation today that was more impactful, that would result in something in September.
Mhm.
Seems like it's worth doing. And then the other thing we heard from many folks was just a dissatisfaction with November in particular.
Mhm.
There's 18 school days, there's 5 half days. It's a lot. I was toying with the idea of, for consistency, maybe every Wednesday in November should just be a half day. But then you actually run into a week where you have a day on, a day off, a half day, a day on, a day off. It's like, maybe that should just be no school the entire week. But November's very busy, and in my opinion, it's too busy. And hopefully we can make some changes long term. My other question is, in the fall semester, the middle school has 3 afternoon conferences, and in the spring semester, they only have 2 afternoon conferences. I didn't notice that in the contract, we need to do 3 and 2. Can we do 2 and 2, or?
The contract specifies 3 because it's considered to be an elementary school. For
Middle school
contract.
is,
Right.
because it's K through 8.
So years ago, we made that change and obviously they were fine with it, or we would have negotiated over it, so. And just for the record, so to speak, we have discussed the number of half days with our respective unions and have indicated that, it's something that we would like to review. But again, the process when you write things into a contract, more often than not, is negotiation. And it may be a minimal negotiation and may not take any time at all, or it may be something that's important to the various unions, and they may see things a little bit differently than I do. My viewpoint as a superintendent. I do feel these PD days are not maybe all that we have, but it's important to offer PD to our staff. That's one of the key tenets in how we become a high-performing school district. So that doesn't happen without a strategic plan and an opportunity to work with staff to continue to enhance their tools to meet student needs. I mean, you can take courses, but that's not the same as working together towards common goals and actualizing those goals. So there is something that hopefully can be done. Again, I'm going to make it a statement as a superintendent. I would like to see some of these half days reduced, but in moderation. And as I said, we've had some good discussions, and we'll see what comes out of those discussions as time goes on.
Sure, I can appreciate that. I'm happy to hear that. I have some language from the contract in front of me. So it says, unless specified, when grade levels are discussed, the term elementary will apply to K to 8 and high school will be 9 to 12. But the way that the conference language breaks out, it actually is specified, which is bizarre because that we're silent on the middle school. It says the conference plan will consist of 3 early release days and 1 night conference per semester at Shaker Lane and Russell Street schools. It doesn't say anything about the middle school, and we have 3 and 2, so we're not consistent. So I'm just wondering, I know that we weren't consistent this present year, and if we're just rolling with inconsistency or.
Well, contract language has to have both parties to agree on change, and that obviously hasn't happened at this point in time. I do believe, if my memory serves me right, there is another section in the contract that does touch on middle school. I'll have to look at it again.
Okay.
And re-identify where it actually is, if it does exist. But
Yeah,
there's something in there that rings a bell with me that
Okay.
it was omitted in that section, but then it was brought in another section.
And it also just might be the fact that in this fall, there's a greater need for conferences, like almost everyone takes a conference, and by the spring rolls around in the middle school, maybe everyone doesn't take a conference, and then you need less conference times.
Sure.
That might be happening that I'm just not aware of. And then just my last observation is that technically the teachers could go to work, their first day of work could be September 1st, which I realize is Friday. And the students could start on the 5th.
Mhm.
That only slides us one day, which doesn't seem that impactful. But if we ended up with one snow day, we'd get out before Juneteenth.
Sure.
If we made some other changes, which are to be discussed at the following meeting as it relates to religious holidays, we could potentially get out as early as the 14th. And if we ran into 3 snow days like we have this year, we would be in a situation we avoid going to school in the last week of June, which is the current situation that we're in right now.
Right.
Which is another concern that parents expressed was if I have to sign my kids up for camp, if my child's looking for employment, you know, they lose out on that opportunity because they're no longer able to start work as early as some of the other surrounding towns. And for the camp thing, they're paying for a full week's worth of camp, knowing that their child might be in school. So that's one way under the current contract to try to get out and avoid being in school the last week of June. So I bring that to everyone's attention. Questions, comments?
I don't hate it. You know, just trying to imagine, we've heard the same, I've gotten the same emails and we've all seen the same ones, right?
Right.
And what's clear is that people are conflating. If you're not involved in negotiations, we're conflating a lot of different issues. So, people are conflating their emails, school start times, start date, professional development days, conferences and religious holidays. We'll get an email with one of those things as the top line, but commenting on all 5 of them. And some things we can decide as a school committee, some things we have to negotiate with our partners in the LEA. And so as we look at things we can control within the current contractual parameters, getting us that extra day by having the teachers come back on Friday, the 1st, it is in the contract. If that gets us a day at the end, it might be worth it. At first blush, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. And I'd love to hear, and I'm sure we will hear from teachers about that. But I don't know. But I do know that that we're hearing from a lot of families about the need to start as early as possible and get out at a predictable time, preferably before the last week of June.
Right.
And if that's, of all these 5 things that we can control, that's one of them. It wouldn't impact families so much as it would impact teachers. That's maybe unfair. It's a disparity, certainly, but that's an option.
And I had one more idea that I forgot to mention, which is last year was my idea to slide a couple Wednesdays to Fridays, and I picked some long weekends to do so. And you've already raised one concern, which was potentially attendance was down. The second issue, which I wasn't aware of at the time of the recommendation, was that some teachers were going to lose that duty-free prep period that they enjoy on a Friday that they necessarily don't have on a Wednesday anyways. And I can appreciate that. So taking that into consideration, I still do think there's an opportunity to move 3 Wednesdays to Fridays, and it's the week before school vacation weeks. Because I don't believe that loss of a prep time going into a week's vacation is that impactful. And I don't know how rigorous the academics are on a Friday afternoon going into a school vacation week.
John?
They are as rigorous as they need to be.
For everyone's mental health, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason why I highlight that is because
I had to give a big answer.
families have obviously made arrangements for childcare for the 3 school vacation weeks. So whether they're going away themselves or they're taking the time off of work or they figured something out. It's a lot easier to figure something out the Friday before school vacation week than it is a random Wednesday a week before. What I will note is I appreciated not seeing any Wednesdays half days directly after vacation weeks, which I think is what we're enjoying this year, which is the kids are out and then we have a half day the following week. So that's just maybe like a 5th idea on possible improvements to alleviate some of the concern among community members about how difficult it is to manage all of the half days in our calendar.
Right. And just for reference purposes, we sit down with LEA representatives when we develop a draft calendar, so they have had their input in this calendar with the parameters that we currently have. So again, we're open for conversations, and as we said many times, we have community members with different viewpoints, and your job as a school committee in the areas that you have decision-making authority is to weigh in on the information that you've heard, think about student interest, and make a decision on the basis of those two areas.
Yeah, but the areas where we have kind of complete discretionary authority are actually pretty limited, it seems like. Let me ask you a question.
Happened through negotiation.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Which I'm a big fan of. November is when we get a lot of the emails. November, if you look at the calendar, it's full of all different types of colors and bold blocks, everything else. Part of that's because that has Veterans Day and Thanksgiving. So 2 of the 4 weeks are already encumbered by federal holidays.
Right.
Is there a way to distribute the ones that aren't, and I guess Election Day too, probably.
Sure.
If we have 3 days that are already going to disrupt our kind of desire to have complete weeks of education for our students already in November, is there a way to distribute some of the others so that November isn't so disrupted? Like Justin was saying, but how many complete days do we have in November?
13.
13 complete days in a month with 30 days.
Right.
Isn't a lot. And I'm just asking, is there a way to, if we're going to keep, if we're going to follow the existing contractual parameters, and we need to, or we'll probably need to keep the number of half days, the conference schedules until it's negotiated. Maybe it'll say the same after negotiation, maybe change through negotiation. But right now, this is the contract we have. Is there a way to spread some of that out so November isn't as disrupted for our kids and for our families?
I mean, that's something we've taken a look at. Again, I have to be cautious about how much I say.
Sure.
We have expressed interest to decrease the number of Wednesdays in our calendar through discussions with the 3 unions that we have in our district.
Mhm.
I can only go that far. One thing you need to remember is when we're working on the introduction of new curricula within our district, we need to front load some of that professional development so that our teachers are well prepared to handle the new curriculum that we expect them to teach. So, I mean, there's so many things to think about when you're creating a calendar. Would I like to see fewer Wednesdays in November or fewer half days in November? You bet. We've already had that conversation, but we have to follow a process at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, all other months have 1 or 2 half days, except for the months where we have conferences. And you end up with 5 in November, and you end up with 4 in March, and this is K-8 I'm talking about.
And I'm just looking at, December, we could possibly move one of those days to December. We're looking at the calendar.
22nd would
Could
be a
we
good
move one of
choice.
those
Mhm.
to, like Justin said, do it like a Friday before a vacation? So like
You
so
could.
November and have it be on Friday, December 22nd, and take November 22nd and have it be on April 12th.
We could, but we're moving away from some of the information that we took in from elementary staff and families. So this is a draft calendar. We can do many different things. But I am going to make a statement about Fridays and half days. Our teachers are dedicated. I know it's before a break, etc. But our curriculum are robust. And our teachers are very skilled at keeping our students attentive, no matter what day it is. So I don't want anybody in this room or anybody on camera thinking that the half days before a natural break are a waste. They're not. They're not. I mean, we're in the schools during those times. Kids are learning. And we have options. I mean, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we're trying to take care of the needs of the district, to make sure that our students in our community are getting an outstanding education. And at the same time, we're trying to meet parents. And that's what we do every time we design a calendar. And then when it comes to the school committee, we continue our conversation and come to some type of agreement in terms of what that actually means when we take all these factors into consideration.
Sure, and I can appreciate that, and I hope you can appreciate our
Of course.
viewpoints as well, because we're the elected officials that are to represent the community, and we hear from community members, and this is the feedback we've gotten, so we simply pass it along for consideration.
Want the
I
minutes to
received
reflect
that
that
feedback as well.
Air quotes.
Yeah, they want the minutes to reflect just these air quotes for elected officials. That's nice.
We are, I mean.
Yeah. So, one thing I will note about this calendar, just, that's relevant to our DEI student presentation and consideration moving forward, is that Diwali is on a Sunday, during the next calendar year. And so this calendar reflects only 2 of the religious holidays that we've agreed currently to observe anyway.
Correct.
So just, we're talking about like saving days or, moving things forward. This calendar, only has 2 school days, that are currently where the schools should be closed for religious, non-federal religious holidays. Of course, we get a whole week off for Christmas because it's the United States and we privilege some of our others. But just relevant to that other conversation. Just want to point that out.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the religious holidays are not in the contract.
No,
I don't believe they are.
they,
It's just a practice that we've adopted over time.
you're right, they will be in 2 of the contracts.
Okay.
But not the 3rd.
I didn't see them in the current posted contract for the LEA, but
Right.
for the current year. Does that wrap up our discussion on this? More to be had next meeting?
Is that we'll kind of solidify this more next meeting? Is
Of
that like
course, I
you'll
mean-
go back and kind of figure out what
Yeah.
we put around, and then next week we'll iron out the holidays and any other proposals?
Yeah,
that
we just wanted to
expect.
give you a skeletal calendar to look at so that you had something to think about prior to the next meeting, when we're hoping we'll have a vote and have a calendar in place for next year.
If memory serves me correctly, sort of the similar process happened last year, where you presented a calendar, which was a calendar that was, like you said, had gone through a process, input from staff and faculty members, and then it was presented to the school committee. We had our own feedback, and then some changes, were made. So I guess what I would ask is, between now and next meeting, maybe you could revisit with the calendar subcommittee some of the topics, some of the ideas that we talked about this evening. And if you want to present next week the same calendar, so be it. We'll discuss the same calendar proposal, or if you want to make some changes, by all means, feel free to do so.
It would be very helpful to me. I don't want to prolong this conversation. The whole intent with putting this calendar on was just to give you a visual. But I'm not completely convinced I know exactly what you want. I've heard individual comments, but I don't have a direction at this point in time.
Well, let's save that for next meeting then, since we'll have
Well, you're
5 of us
trying
in a
to,
row.
you want to kind of outline right now, though,
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
if you want to come back next week with
I mean,
something definitive.
I see, we have a lot of things to discuss next meeting
Right.
and, I mean, I can certainly jot down some things that we discussed, but at this point in time, I'm not sure whether that's school committee direction or not.
Okay,
So,
which is fine. I was thinking maybe you had heard an idea that struck home with you, and it's like, geez, let me run that back through the committee to see if it's something we might want to entertain. If so, so be it. If not, we can just look at the same calendar next week when all 5 of us are present.
I mean, the only new one that we haven't thought about before was that September 1st start.
I'm wanting to see if this calendar subcommittee,
Can always float that by them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's nothing else that we've recommended that we can really do much about.
Well, you could move some of those half days to Friday afternoons if you so chose. We could take one of the November half days and move it to December 20th. I mean, there are always opportunities for a bit of flexibility within a calendar. So, I mean, this certainly isn't written in stone by any means, but it's always nice to see what we've come up with and then have that conversation about what's the best way to go.
Speaking as an individual, not for the entire committee, I would like us to do whatever we can to give us more continuity in November.
Mhm.
If that means moving one of the, if we're keeping the same number of days and means moving one around, then I'm in favor of that. But November's going to be tough, just given Election Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving. Giving our kids more full days in that month, I think would benefit them. So
I'm in agreement with that. And if this is not a vote by any stretch of the imagination, but saying I'm in agreement with it. And the one I would look to move would be the November 1st one. Because you kind of have a half day every other day in October, and then you could put 2 weeks together, end of October, first week in November. And then you run into the mess, which is Election Day and the conferences, and then you get the half day before Thanksgiving. People are traveling, it's, who knows, so. But I'm in agreement with that. If there could be an effort made to
Sure.
have greater than 13 full days in November, I would be all for that.
I think I wanted to add too, is I really liked the calendar that you had sent us from Wyndham, just how it was visually presented. It was just much more easy to, it was easier to understand and to read rather than going back and forth to a sheet. So
You send me that calendar, we'll take a look at it.
I certainly can. It's very different district, very different way of doing things. They have just a couple PD days. They only have a couple half days a year. They don't have any half day conferences. So I'll be happy to send it to you.
All right, thank you.
All right, we good? Yeah. Excellent. All right. So new business item number 2, transportation bid discussion. I'll just read it for the audience. Business manager Steve Mark and Superintendent Clenchey will present an overview of potential costs over a 3-year period. School committee will continue to discuss the school start time proposal as it relates to the cost projection included in the transportation bid, potential bid, and vote is scheduled for March 9, 2023 school committee meeting. We've allowed up to 50 minutes for this presentation. I think we can probably do this in 20. So let's see where we end up. Yeah.
As long as short as you want.
All right, so let me share this. So, as we've discussed numerous times, we went out to bid for busing. We're in year 5 of our 5-year contract, so we had to go out to bid. Unfortunately, again, we had multiple companies inquire and take the bid package. We had one company actually submit a bid. Unfortunately, so our hands are kind of tied. So let me just back up a little bit. And just for reference, let me just talk about what's on the screen and what's in the packet. So the top just gives a budget update as far as where our budget request is. So our initial budget request was $1,703,000, which was 7.4%. We're now
to be clear, I'm sorry, Steve, but that budget request is over the existing appropriated budget.
Correct.
Okay.
correct. So that's the budget appropriation with the town. The town asked to get down to 6%, which is $1,383,000. So out of that initial budget request, we had to reduce that budget request by $320,000. Just as a kind of a background where we're at. So we did get the buses, the bid from D-Bus. We asked them to bid on 2 options. Option A was the current 3-tiered model that we currently run. Option B was the new 2-tiered model, as we've discussed, for the school start time scenarios. That would move us to 14 buses. The bid prices are on the screen. The option A, which is the current model, was $763,020. The option B to move to the 2-tier model, again, that's 5 additional buses, was $1,247,400. That's a difference of $484,380 the first year. I then tried to calculate out what those contracts would be over the life of the contract. So I used a 5% COLA factor. We can run that any way you want. The last couple of years, the COLA that D-Bus has been, and the COLA factor is tied to industry standard that's published. I forgot which one it is, but it's very specific in the contract, what COLA indicators they have to use. So I used 5% the last couple of years. COLA increases from D-Bus have been over 5%. And we all know where COLA inflation factors have been nationwide for lots of other goods and services. So I ran it at 5%. We can run it at 3, we can run it at 7. I just picked 5.
I'm sorry to interrupt, just to make sure I understand. The contract language that D proposed includes, we'll use this indicator, but doesn't have the.
It doesn't have a
It's
fixed
the,
COLA in it.
Gotcha, okay.
It references a specific COLA cost of living index.
Gotcha.
Consumer price index or
yeah,
something.
Right.
Thank you.
Boston Transportation, I forgot what it's called, but so if we look at the 3-tier model, the current model that we're running, the new bid price is $763,020. If we forecast that out over the next 5 years, at the end of that 5 years, that contract rises to $927,456. That's a COLA increase of $164,000 over the 5 years. Again, that's based on 5%. If we look at the option B 2-tiered model, that contract for year 1 is $1,247,000. Over a 5-year contract period, that contract would rise in year 5 to $1,516,222. Again, that's based off of 5% COLA. It's not going to be consistent in every year. It's going to fluctuate. I get that, but for argument's sake, those are those are what we're looking at.
And again, I'm sorry, just for my clarity. So that's 270,000 increase on top of the 484.
Correct.
Okay. So we're looking at
Correct.
$750,000 difference.
Over 5 years.
Oh, base, okay.
Correct. Correct. So again, that's for reference, that's for information. We don't obviously know where COLA is going to go. We don't know what gas prices are going to do. You know, I have had conversations with D-Bus about the cost of a 2-tier model, adding those 5 buses. Is 5 additional buses, that's more mechanical work, more fuel, more everything else that they have to then do, and that drives the price up.
Yeah, it should be less fuel if the buses are running 2 loops versus 3 loops. Some of the rationale, the fact that it's like the reverse of what you would expect. Like we should be getting a better deal by buying more buses. We're getting a worse deal per bus. So I don't necessarily understand that, but we don't have any control.
I don't have any control over what they did. So
like the buses are gonna do less miles, so there's less wear and tear, there's less mechanical costs associated with it. Like it just doesn't seem to make any sense, but again, we don't have any control over the bid.
they are right. So you want me to keep? So the rest of that page talks about school choice.
So my
You want me to stop there for now?
Yeah, and we can, my question is, the bid for next year's, 763 on the 3-tier model. Currently, it's 603, if my memory serves me
Right, that's the
correctly.
current year price this year.
So there's $160,000 increase, which we were expecting an increase, but just not that much. What did we budget, for next year appropriated for busing? I was trying to find one of the sheets that we presented. But
Yeah, we asked for an additional $118,000
yeah,
for the normal bus contract. And then we asked for the $280,000 for the additional busing. So if you had the 280 and the 118.
yeah, it's not a straightforward question. My apologies. It's certainly not a straightforward answer because of the 603, there's an appropriated portion that covers that, and then there's bus fees that cover that.
Correct.
The model that we were proposing was, we were looking to cover a portion, we were looking to cover all of the likely increase from the contract through the appropriated.
Correct.
And then when we presented to the select board and the FinCom of the projected $280,000 increase, I believe we were asking for them to pick up 180 and we were going to cover 100 ourselves through likely an increase of bus
Bus
revenue.
fees and athletic fees,
Yeah.
correct?
And the reality is that it's not a $280,000 increase. It's more like a $480,000 increase.
Correct, and when we
And
looked at
that's
the,
not current year versus two-tier, that's three-tier versus two-tier and the new count and the new
Correct.
contract.
correct. And when we looked at the two-tier option, so the 1,247,000,
Mhm.
and looked at the identified revenue sources that we identified during our budget discussions and putting that budget together, even with the 180 and the $100,000 in additional fees, we would still be $267,000 shortfall to cover the two-tier bus option. If that makes sense. It gets
Are
pretty
you looking at the
complicated.
fiscal year 2024?
I'm sorry?
Are you now into the school choice fiscal year 2024 portion of the slide? Were you
No,
referencing the
no,
267,000?
no,
Okay, because that same 267,000 is,
it rolls into that discussion, but
Okay.
yes.
Right, we're just not there yet.
okay, that was the preview.
Can I ask one more clarifying question, just to make sure I understand it? So we're throwing a lot of numbers around. Currently, this last year, we budgeted through appropriated funds and through school bus fees, $603,000.
That's the cost.
That's the cost.
That's the cost.
That's the cost.
Right.
If the cost of going, so 603 this year, if we did, according to this budget, the three-tier next year, it'd be 1.25 million,
No,
No,
760.
763
On the three-tier.
under. Okay, yeah, so,
Yeah,
so I was thinking about like, we voted the school committee, we want the two-tier system. I'm trying to figure out what the change in our budget is from what we're currently paying for buses to what we would do
1.2
to 1.25. So it's looking at it's basically doubling our
Yes.
cost
Yeah.
to go from the expenses based on our last contract to the to
Correct.
this two-tier system that we did. That
Correct.
we wanted.
So we're running 9 buses now, so we'd be running 14.
Yeah.
So it's not quite doubling the bus fleet, but
But it's doubling our cost. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
close.
And we spend about 2.5% of our appropriated funds on busing. And if we were to move forward to the two-tier system, we'd be spending about 5% of our appropriated funds on busing.
correct. And then part of that discussion was also increasing the athletic fees and the bus fees to help mitigate some of those costs.
Right.
And with the $100,000 that we put in as a placeholder, we definitely didn't have an agreement in terms of whether that was attainable, in terms of looking at the percentage of fee increases for athletics and.
Right. That would need to be a whole nother follow-up conversation.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay. So you want to walk us through the impact of the school choice funds?
Yeah, let me
Or
walk
to
the, so,
continue to pursue, continue to pursue, I mean, we are going to continue to pursue it. So could you walk us through that so we can just understand
yeah,
this?
so so I was asked to calculate and kind of forecast what happens to school choice funds over a couple of years. If
To fund the two-tier model.
Right, if we went to a two-tier model, and school committee voted the two-tier model with the assumption that the additional funding was going to be drawn from the school choice funds. That's what this model attempts to show. So, we expect to end this year, with approximately 2.6 million in school choice funds. We take in, and I'll walk through the first year, I'll walk through this year, and then I won't go through every year because it's pretty much repetitive.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting these questions though, but does this model assume that we're funding all the difference through school choice, or does this assume that we've also raised some money up to 100,000?
It's a mix.
Okay.
Correct. So,
Okay,
it assumes that we're gonna build into future
gotcha.
budget requests from the town, additional funding to help, mitigate those offsets.
Let's just back up half a point.
Mhm.
If you recall, we have tentatively built in 180,000 dollars for increase in transportation costs into the operational budget. But we haven't voted that yet.
Plus a little more, because there was a contract piece and then there was a 2-tier piece. So it was 180 and I think.
Oh, that's right.
The other
It
number.
was 180 plus 113 or something like
Was it
that.
113?
113,473.
So 113 plus 180, so it's really 293. Appropriated.
But in order to do that, we had to, because we were asked to bring our budget down to 6%, we decreased some of our asks by $320,000.
But we still have the 113 and the 180 in that. Don't we?
Right.
Correct.
Well, we put the 113 and the 130 in operational, but as we were asked to cut our original budget request by
That's my thanks.
$320,000,
from
we took
special ed.
off some
Yeah.
things
Sure.
that we would have liked to pursue in terms of
Yes.
staffing, et cetera.
Yes.
Sorry, Steve. Go
That's
ahead.
okay.
Just-
Yes. Jen's hands up. Why don't we hear from Jen? Hey, Jen.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So, Steve, is there any chance for negotiating at all? I realize that D is the only bidder, but I mean, and maybe we have no leverage, but the leverage is like they lose the whole contract. Is there any option to negotiate? And I also feel like, Justin, you have valid questions there about like fuel cost assumptions and wear and tear. I mean, what if we could get that down like some significant percentage points?
So they're under no obligation to negotiate. I have asked them if that was flexible at all, and they've indicated those are the numbers they need in order to run the bus fleet. You do have an option. You can reject the bid, go up to bid again. In my opinion and experience, it's only going to drive that number higher. Right now, we have until March 24th to award the contract. If we don't award the contract before March 24th, then D-Bus could conceivably come back and say, I didn't get the contract, we're withdrawing the bid. And then we forced to go out to bid again and probably get higher prices. We also run the risk of not having a bus contractor in the beginning of September, and then we'd be in violation because we're by law required to transport students over 2 miles K to 6 to school. It's required, it's mandated. So there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot of unknowns. Not something I would recommend at all.
Okay, thanks.
But Jen, if you want to, I mean, I'm more than glad to broker a conversation with D-Bus, and if you want to participate, we're welcome to have that conversation. But I have had that conversation with Sandra from D-Bus, and she did not indicate a willingness to negotiate those prices because one, they don't have to.
No, I get that. I get that they know that they're the only bid and we have no leverage, but I would also think that, you know, we're a pretty valuable customer to them and they wouldn't want us to walk away. So I get it. It's a fine line and there's risk, but, and obviously I don't want to put us in risk of losing the contract completely.
So D-Bus services 14 other communities.
Mm-hmm.
If they lost Littleton, it's small change. Littleton is small change to D-Bus. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
They could care less, but we would be the ones suffering from that consequence because we're not going to get any other bidders because there's no other bus companies that are interested in bidding on Littleton.
Yeah, I get that.
They're too far away. Their bus companies I can show you the list. They're very regionalized about the districts they serve because they put a lot of investment into developing those infrastructures for maintenance and bus lots and where they're housing and offices and things like that. So it's a pretty complicated business.
Just to add a little more perspective to this, as you all know, we transport our out-of-district students, and most of those students are transported by our collaborative called CASE. There are times where they're unable to transport our students, and we go to another private contractor, and our fees are over double, close to triple what we would pay CASE. So it's just an indication of what the market is out there at this point.
And honestly, we've gone to D-Bus for some of those special ed needs, and they've worked with us if they have the drivers and if they have the smaller vans available, and they've been able and willing to accommodate us in that situation if they can. And their prices were not nearly as high as some of these other contractors, Dr. Clancy just mentioned.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Um,
Can I just ask a
Sure.
question too? And maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm skipping, glossing over the numbers for just a minute and just looking at that. We need to accept the 6 additional students for school choice. As the years go on, we need to continue to add students for school choice to support this endeavor. Is that correct?
That's correct. So
In kindergarten,
What's that?
in kindergarten.
Just in kindergarten?
Well, that's where we
likely where you pick 'em
capture them. And then in order to have consistency, stronger word, we have waiting lists, by the way. In order for us to continue to maintain our school choice fund on a yearly basis.
Right.
The best way to do that is parents are more prone to enroll their students and children in a school system when they first start school. And, we have a window of opportunity K-2, but as we go up from grade to grade, the opportunities decrease somewhat, unless there's a compelling reason why a family may want to move their children to another school, through school choice.
So I can jump in on this. So essentially the assumption through the analysis here that we're going to continue to receive $450,000 a year in school choice. We need that level of students to maintain that 450,000 because those are the folks that were graduating, they're going to fall off.
Okay. Okay.
And kind of the skinny here is impact year number 1, fiscal year 2024. You're showing a spend out of school choice to the amount of $267,000 to cover the need for busing if we move to a 2-tier system.
Correct.
And then it gets less the following year because I think there's an assumption that we're going to pick up some appropriated funds.
Correct.
And that continues to happen.
Correct.
So what we're essentially showing here is that we project to have about $2.7 million in our school choice safety net fund, use a net term again. And so we have money to do this,
Right.
but it's a savings account. So if you spend it all, it's gone. We're only getting $450,000 a year, and we've already worked into the budget a spend of at least $250,000. So we only really add 200 grand every year.
Mhm.
And so what we're showing here is that we would likely need to spend greater than the amount of money that we're receiving or that we had planned on saving. So the school choice fund, whittles down to $2 million versus 2.7 if we were to phase this in. And that's assumptions that that the appropriated funds are going to continue to go up and we're going to receive the support from the town. And then we're going to be able to maintain the school choice dollars at $450,000 per year.
Mhm.
But it shows that we can do it. It just shows how expensive it
So
is.
what this model does is it for the current year, for next year, as Justin mentioned, we would use a portion of it to pay for the bus contract. Then we use a portion of it to pay for payroll. We would still likely add that sped administrative support personnel because that was recommended by the state review committee. And then if you remember in our budget discussions to get down to the 6% and leave as much funding available to help cover the busing, we had talked about rolling the sped out of district tuition increase at 14% we talked about, and funding a portion of that additionally out of school choice as well. So that's what that 102,000 is. So not only would we have to fund the busing, but because we're using part of those funds that we allocated to pay for the busing, we also have to still fund potential school choice, out of district tuition increases because we reduced that number in our appropriation request.
And that percentage isn't a guess. That's a hard percentage.
No, that
That's what you
14%
get.
is a hard number for
Yeah.
next year.
Thank
As
Yeah.
put up by OSD, we had that discussion. So what this model does is it's pretty much consistent through the next couple of years. It's the 450, and then the 2025 year, as the chairman mentioned, we would roll over part of that increase into a budget request but we still have to fund the balance out of school choice. In 2026, we reduced that number again because we're going to ask the town for additional funding. So that's really what this is. I won't go through every line and every number because it's going to bore everybody and overwhelm everybody. But
There are unanticipated expenditures that are going to happen. And just a little bit of more information, MSBA has verified that our community is growing, which means we have more students that are going to enroll in our schools. There is no guarantee that we're going to be able to keep the number of school choice students that we have. It really depends if we add another classroom and we have 12 students in that classroom, then we have opportunity. But if we add another classroom and we have 20 students in that class, we don't have much opportunity at all. So if you look at this chart, if you look at FY25, in order to maintain our current number of school choice students, we'd have to take 10 additional students into kindergarten.
that's on top of the 6 from the prior year.
Right.
Is cumulative.
In FY26,
Oh, that's cumulative.
FY26, we would have to take in 11 additional students because those are the number of students that are the school choice students that are graduating during those 2 years. So a lot of moving parts.
And it's my understanding that with especially with the King Street Commons project, that if we are at capacity with kids coming in, that school choice, those are the first positions to go to fill so that those kids can come into our school district.
Well,
Is that correct?
Somewhat. It's correct in the sense that every school choice student that has entered our district has a legal right to graduate from our district. So we would start to decrease when in terms of how many students we took in at the kindergarten level.
So we're depending on increasing the student choice levels, but at the same time, potentially
We're
needing to
not-
decrease.
We're not really, we're not,
Go ahead.
we're not increasing the school choice kids, we're maintaining.
That's why that 450,000 is there every year, because we're looking to just maintain the same level of school choice revenue.
If the number,
Yeah, maintain
to
the
do
revenue,
that,
but
we would
increase
have
the
to-
number of, increase the number of bodies. Is
But,
what I- is
Well,
what I'm-
we
not
graduated
increasing.
6, we'd want to pick up 6 next
we're
year. So
replenishing the kids that the number that graduate. We're replenishing by accepting that number of students into the school choice program.
Okay,
But can I ask I think I know what what I'm interested in, that means we're adding 6 plus 10 kindergarten students, probably kindergarten or lower elementary. If you said most our kids who enter our system are K through 2.
That's when they first
Right.
enroll in our system.
Yeah. And so if we're saying to maintain that 450 to replenish our graduating people, then we're looking at adding 16 students.
It would be 6
No.
the first year,
No,
and then those kids go to grade 1. The new kindergarten class coming in would need 10 students the following year. The next year they would move up, and then we would need 11 additional students just to maintain the number of
Right.
school choice kids that we have.
And so, but that means we have 11 kids across 5 classrooms in kindergarten?
6.
6, okay. So 1.8 additional kids per kindergarten classroom. Is-
Right.
So there's a lot of, there's obviously a lot of numbers here, but that's another factor is what are we doing to our class sizes at the lower elementary?
I mean, we've typically throughout time, I don't recall ever accepting any more than 7 school choice students in kindergarten. We've been cautious, and rightly so. And with enrollment trends, it's not as consistent as you would think. I mean, there have been times where we've had 12 students move into grade 2 or 15 students move into grade 6. Like it's not consistent. We can't predict who's moving into our community and what age children we have.
So I would.
So
Go ahead.
let me just, one last comment. So if you look at the last year of the analysis, right? What we're doing is we're forecasting that the revenues is like a use of cash statement, right? For financial people. We're going to end this year with approximately 2.7 million in school choice at the end of the current fiscal year. At the end of 2027, we think that number will drop to a little over 2 million with all the ins and the outs. Still a good number.
Well, that's my question, that maybe it's better to wait till we have town administrator here, but I don't know what best practices are. What's the right number for us to want to have in reserve? What's the acceptable range where we're being responsible kind of stewards of this money, but also prepared for unexpected expenses? Is 2 million, do we feel okay with that number?
Well, it's the most money we've had, and probably if I go back to the history of the 15 years, the organization, I don't think we would have had that much money, but you have to remember that when we have students that require out of district placements,
Sure.
that's the fund that we draw from to pay for those students. And costs vary from $80,000 to $300,000 per child. So that 2 million could dwindle pretty fast in a 2 or 3 year period. I think one other thing we need to think about here, school choice doesn't have any what they call explicit guidelines, but it has implicit guidelines. And what I mean by that is school choice money should be used to enhance educational opportunities for all students. Now, when I look at transportation, we typically don't transport school choice students. Rare occasion we do. We have 3 or 4 we're transporting because they live close together and they're where we pick them up is in Littleton. The bus can turn around. They're older students, but most of the time we do not offer transportation to school choice students. So we're relying on we could be relying on a school choice fund that is supporting a transportation component to the students in our community, but not supporting transportation for school choice students.
See, I appreciate that. I would frame it differently. I would say that changing the school start times based on every study we read is the one thing we can do to increase the educational opportunities for all of our students across the board. And how we transport people is one thing, but getting them in the schools later and letting them get more sleep and be better rested, it's going to help their mental health, it's going to help their academic performance. That's why we're so enthusiastic about it. And so I think that, this is a big number, but it may be worth it, because I think this is the one thing we can do that's going to improve the lives of all of our kids. Every single one of them, whether they walk to school, ride a bike to school, take a bus in, or have a parent drop.
Well, I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pose a question to all of you, is there another way of doing this without expending that kind of money?
If there is, I wish we'd found it 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think we exhausted all the options, right? Like, that's the big question. I don't think there's a way.
Not necessarily.
Mhm.
Not necessarily. We wouldn't capture the 25 minutes, or perhaps 30 minutes that we're extending the start of the school day, but there may be a way within the 3-tiered system to capture 20 minutes.
Like just push everything back 20 minutes.
Exactly. And if we did that, and I'm not pushing anything at this point in time, I'm just creating some thought process here. That means Shaker Lane would be dismissed at 3:35. So I know there's a differential in dismissal times, but I really believe that if this is really important to us, and as a school committee, you deem that the 2-tiered system is too expensive, there is an alternative.
All right.
Just something to
Right.
think about.
Yeah, we could push everybody back. We eliminated that, as a reminder, we eliminated that option because we heard from Michelle that it wasn't a viable option for her. The whole school, her students and staff. That was the main reason. And we can't push the middle school and high school back too much later, put them at the end because of sports. So
There are limitations.
yes.
Why don't, I want to recognize, someone who wishes to speak, but, this is a lot of information. We need time to digest it. As noted on the agenda, we're gonna, discuss this and potentially revisit the vote at the following meeting. A week will give us time to think about it, maybe ask questions of the business manager and superintendent. I'm not looking to shortchange the topic by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have other things to get to, and we're not going to make any decisions tonight. So we have an opportunity for interested citizens at the beginning and at the end, but because this is such a hot topic and I know someone wishes to speak, if there's anyone that wants to speak I would invite you to the podium, name and address, and 3 minutes would be
Thank
great.
you, Mr. Chair. Chase Gerwig, 1 Oak Ridge Road. I wanted to address essentially then the fact that you're dealing with a not insubstantial cost increase, but really ask you to balance that really against the system-wide benefits. And I'm maybe a little bit frustrated that I've been here for an hour and we talked about scheduling and we've talked about school start times. And it was only at the very end that the educational benefit of students ever even come up. I'm actually shocked that in the context of schedule, how students are educated was never even part of the discussion. Only at the very end of this discussion was the educational benefit of shifting start times incorporated in the discussion. Listen, I've been in your shoes. I understand that you're really trying to balance the money side of things. But I want to remind you of the importance of the educational benefits that are spread across all of our students. And I really particularly want to remind you of how the school committee handled full day pre-K or full day kindergarten, because there are a lot of analogs here. And principally what I want to remind you of is the fact that the school committee at that time, number one, put educational value first. And in fact, got out in front of this. Listen, I was on the select board at that time. We got our arms twisted a little bit into accepting that in the budget. And the town administrator is probably cringing behind me. But what I'm telling you is that you have tools to bring this to bear. And I appreciate that your models have incorporated some enhanced appropriation. But the fact of the matter is that that was on the same order of magnitude of total cost increase. But we were talking about probably a bigger benefit per student, but a much, much smaller number of students. Here we're talking about a benefit to our entire student population. And I think you need to look at the overall benefit in the context of the dollars and understand that certainly at a lower dollar value, the cost benefit is great, right? But even at this dollar value, the cost benefit is enormous to our overall student population. I want to address a couple small things here too. With respect to utilization of student choice funds, it's very interesting to see the superintendent say that we really should only use those to enhance the education of all students, when in the context of full day kindergarten, that was never a discussion of the school committee. And that was solely for the benefit, using those school choice funds was solely for the benefit of those kids. Now, I understand that then cascades through the years, but the school choice children who joined the district after that saw no benefit from that money. So I would invite the school committee to disregard that argument. The other piece that I'd like to invite you to consider is that I think you've got to consider other tools. And certainly I'm not nuanced in the math and the facts here in terms of what you're able to do. But I will tell you, we live out more than 2 miles outside of the radius of most of the schools. I don't know how the law works, but to the extent that you have an opportunity to modify fees for people, we would happily pay that. And I think a lot of people outside of that 2 mile radius would as well. Certainly taking a look at rebidding other options, right? We've looked at 2 options here, but rebidding those, I don't know if that's on the table. Changing the appropriations requests. And I do want to circle back to the school choice numbers. You know, the superintendent indicated that this is the highest balance that the school committee has had in 15 years. Part of the reason for that is that the school committee has led first and foremost with what is for the educational benefit of our students and has been willing historically to spend those school choice funds, sometimes to lead the town maybe to where they needed to be, maybe not always as willingly as maybe some members on the select board, but that is part of your mission. That is part of your prerogative, and that is an excellent use of school choice funds, particularly when you're looking at a balance that is still healthy, still robust, and still meets very much minimum requirements. So I understand you're trying to move on from this topic, but certainly please consider the overall impacts to the totality of the population of students, not just the dollar values involved, because when you look at it in a cost benefit analysis, I think you would see that the educational benefits are still overwhelmingly in favor of making this change, even if you can't modify the contract, and even if we have to ultimately absorb this somewhere down the road. And John, I don't mean to pull you out here, but I'm going to pick on you because you're nodding your head here when I'm saying the cost benefits are still worth it. talk to the students about what the cost benefit is. I know you've done that, but talk to the parents again. I know you're on a short shot clock, but I think you will find overwhelming support even at this higher dollar value.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you voicing all of those concerns and observations. We're gonna move on, and I'm going to,
Can I just clarify one point? We never when we were going through the plan to reduce kindergarten fees, that was a 5-year transition plan. We have never used school choice funds to pay for kindergarten. To pick up those kindergarten fees reduction. You had indicated that we'd use school choice funds to help mitigate those fees for the kindergarten fee reduction plan. That was not true.
okay, thank you for the
It's
clarification.
not a big deal, but I just wanted to be clear.
And for my own clarification, I use the word explicit and implicit. We can use school choice funds to fund this transportation project. I did not say we couldn't. The question we pose is that the best way to use that money? And it could be.
Okay, thanks. Good. I'm going to take one item out of order. Norm. So there's a quick presentation that's going to take place for new business item number 5, which is Littleton Youth Baseball softball sponsorship. And the reason why I'm going to do so is every other presentation person kind of has to be here. So I'll allow a resident to jump in front and give his or her 2-minute spiel, and we'll move on from that topic, and we'll get back to the financial update and so on. So this will be quick. Sure.
So quickly, so LYBS was here in front of the committee in January of 2020, and we received approval at that time to put our sponsorship banners up on 5 fields in town at the beginning of the season in April, and leave them up through the duration of the season through the end of November. We finished about Thanksgiving. That approval was for a 1-year time period to be revisited in December of that year, January of the following year, so 21. Because of COVID, etc., that didn't happen, and we have been operating the same way for the last 3 seasons. We just went on that original agreement, not hearing any concern otherwise. So we're here. Mike Lynn had voiced a concern earlier at the end of last season that that the banners were up without approval. I think he'd forgotten, though I didn't know that the committee had approved it, and asked that I come to have that reapproved. So here I am to ask that for reapproval, that we continue to hang our banners on the town fields for like we've been doing for the last 3 years. And have that approval go forward on a permanent basis if we could. Certainly, we put them up in, like I said, in April. We zip time the fences. We're at fields almost daily throughout that time. So we check on them, make sure that they're kept in good repair and they're not in the way of the guys from the highway department, weed whacking, etc. So the original approval was pending any feedback. I don't believe there's been any feedback, positive or negative, in the last 3
I've
years.
received no feedback from my office, so complaints about it,
So I would ask that we could continue putting our banners up.
Sure, I can give you feedback as a coach or as an assistant coach. It's, leaving them up is preferred as to taking them down every game and putting them back up, as the email had indicated from your board members. So, this is something that I'm in support with. I think it just needs to be something that Littleton Youth Baseball and Softball continues to work with Mike Lynn or, the athletic director at the time, just to make sure that they're in good condition, that that they're presented well. But we just had a huge financial discussion. I understand the impact of sponsorships and how it helps the program. So it's something that I'm personally in support of.
I'm to,
Thank
with
you.
your permission, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Please.
I move that the school committee give LYBS approval to hang their sponsorship banners on town fields on an annual basis. And that they will work with the athletic director to make sure they're properly placed and maintained.
Second that.
Motion made by Mr. Austin, seconded by Mr. Marius. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, mark that as unanimous. Thank you, Norm.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. Thanks, Steve. Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect. And I apologize for taking things a little out of order there, but
Sorry.
Norm would give me a bad practice time if I have been here until midnight.
We like you.
Thank you.
All right, jumping back in order here. Number 3, financial update. Business manager Steve Marks will provide a financial update.
So it is not in your packet. We apologize for that. We had some issues with Munis, which is a financials package that we use. It wasn't able to run some reports for a couple of days. So we will update the packet and post this on the website. We just didn't get it out to everybody. So this is our standard report. We're in good shape. But let me talk about the last cost center. So that cost center includes natural gas, maintenance and facilities, repairs, things like that. So our natural gas cost is skyrocketing, much higher than we had anticipated. And so what you see in this number is it's actually a forecast through the end of the year where we expect to end up. So what we do that for budgeting purposes, so we can kind of, we're now in March, we're trying to manage the budget to the end of the year. So we've created some purchase orders for those natural gas expected costs, so we can kind of track that. So that's why that number looks so negative. And part of it is because the natural gas cost is rising and has increased higher than we had anticipated.
So we project that's where we'll end up, not
That's
where we
where,
are.
that's where we think we're gonna end up at this point in
That's
time.
what, thank you.
That whole $219,000 is not just natural gas. There's about $40,000 or $50,000 of some unanticipated repairs we've had to cover this year. We had a boiler at the high school. It's a cast iron boiler. It's got a bunch of cast iron sections, 2 of those cracked, so we had to repair those. We had some issues at Shaker Lane in one of the classrooms. We had to cover the deductible that was over $10,000 that the insurance didn't cover. We had some other things. So there's probably $30,000 or $40,000 in there in that cost that is unanticipated cost that's not related to natural gas. So I don't want people to think the natural gas is like, oh my Lord, it's $200,000 over budget on natural gas. Natural gas is over budgeted. It is over expended. But so that's what that is. And I can come back at a later time with some additional information on that if you guys want me to. But right now, the rest of the budget is still in good shape. We're 60% through the school year. We're almost at 60% expenditures. Again, I'll remind school committee that we do withhold teacher. We're not withholding teacher money. We hold teacher funds aside so we can pay them over the summer. And that's about $2 million that is not yet been paid to the teachers for summer payroll. So that's in that number as well. So again, we're watching the natural gas. I said it here a couple of times. We're watching it. We're trying to manage it. It is overexpended, but I'm not overly concerned at this point in time with the overall school budget and having enough money to go through the end of the school year.
Okay.
Okay.
Just clarifying question. So I understand this. All of the cost centers and that percent used is actual,
Yes.
but what you're telling me is the 112% is actually not an
It-
actual, it's
it's-
forecasted?
It's actual, but that includes any open purchase orders.
Okay, and these are actual purchase orders?
These are purchase orders that we created based on estimates that we think we're gonna pay for the natural gas for the rest of the school year. That make sense? So we created a purchase order for the month of
Not-
March for X amount of dollars.
You know,
We created a purchase order for
I think I would have
April.
liked to have seen that line item with actual use and maybe a comment to suggest that, you know, there are future natural gas purchases and this is what the expectation is. And we might get into a situation where we're going to be at 112 or 120% over the course of the year.
I think we can do that. I
It
think
just seems odd to have all of the cost centers at actual dollars used and then that one line item to have
Sure.
some,
Okay,
some play in it.
okay,
That's my only feedback.
okay. I think there's an option. We can do that in Munis, so I'll double check and I'll present another report in a couple of weeks and with actions.
Sure.
All right,
Perfect.
all right, thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Can I just ask what the other instruction is? Everything else is self-explanatory. What is that?
The other instruction,
Other 295.
athletics.
Okay.
Some coaching stipend, a lot of coaching stipends, clubs, activities,
Okay.
things like that.
And then since we were just talking about busing, it looks like we're already at 93% of our percent used, but we're only 60%.
Yeah, again, I believe that $322,000 is forecasting out what we're gonna spend through the rest of the year. We're trying to get a handle on budget wise where we're at, and that's kind of our tool we do it at. That'll change when I do an actual, as we just talked about.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense, Jason? Okay,
Very good. All
all
right.
right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. So new business item number 4, Town of Littleton 3-year financial forecast. Town administrator, Mr. Anthony and Sal, present the 3-year financial forecast for the town of Littleton. We invited Anthony this evening because although this isn't our budget meeting,
Next slide. Let me get it up, Anthony.
our budget meeting actually takes place 2 meetings away, but we were going over at such a granular level, the spend related to busing and our use of school choice funds and some of these other line items that we thought it would be appropriate to have you in. So thank you for being here.
And we also figured you don't go to enough long meetings, so we don't.
It's my pleasure to be here, believe me. Thank you. I wish I come with a better outlook, consider what we just heard, but.
And Anthony, you can either click or just tell me next slide, I'll do it, whatever you want. It should work.
Okay. All right, so this is a presentation that, back in October, when we started the budget process, we invited FinCom and the school committee, as well as the select board, to hear what we project as a 5-year financial forecast. So what I did is instead of just creating a new one, I dusted off this forecast from October, which I think a couple of 2 or 3 members of the school committee were there at that time. So I'm happy to go through it again. I won't go through every slide because it's long, and I think you've been here a long time already tonight, but certainly I'll answer any questions that you may have. All right, this first slide just is about some current economic conditions with, you know, the concern about a recession. I'm just gonna glance over that one. So we look at a few things when it comes to local receipts. One of those is motor vehicle excise. What we've experienced is a reduction in motor vehicle excise, and I think that's probably not a surprise to anybody that's here, because as you go through and you go buy used car or new car lots, there's none on the lot. They're still having that supply issue. So what does that mean? That means people are buying less new cars, they're holding on to their existing cars, and the excise tax goes down every year, and that goes down pretty rapidly. So that's one of the things that we're concerned about, the trend that was happening. Another thing that we look at is building permits. Building permits are important for a number of reasons, but the most important thing is that it helps determine what new growth is going to be. So what we've experienced during COVID is a lot of people were home and they were doing major projects. The economy is not doing so well. We're seeing the permit number reduced a little bit, but it might even be the same, but the level of the projects are much lower than what people were doing during the pandemic. Another thing we look at is interest rates. I think I don't really have to go into this. I think you've all heard about how interest rates are going up, and just when we're looking from a year ago to back to September 30th, the prime rate was at 3.25 and it was at 6.25, and I'm sure it's even higher now. Littleton has been able to maintain and come out of a lot of recessions that have happened in the past. And why? It's because you have some great financial policies. And conservative budgeting has allowed us not to experience what other communities had to experience with staff reductions, et cetera. This just goes into some of those financial policies, which has really helped keep us in very good financial standings with the AAA bond rating. So this slide here just talks about the projected revenue expenses going from FY 22 out to 29. So as you can see in the FY 23 budget, obviously by law, we have to produce a balanced budget. And then what we do is we forecast out our revenue expenses over the next 5 years, and we see where we stand. So when we started this year budget process, our expenses exceeded our revenue projections by $1 million. And as you can see, as you go up, that just will kind of continue to grow bigger until 29, I believe, is when we start to get a little closer anyways. Our revenue assumptions that we did is we can only raise the levy limit 2.5% every year. That's called Prop 2.5. And with that, we conservatively estimate $500,000 in new growth. Another part of our where our money comes from is state aid. With that, we project an annual increase of 1%. That's a conservative estimate as well. When I talked about some of the other local receipts that were trending down. So what does that mean? So our 5-year revenue projection, as I said in that other slide that showed the graph, we estimate based on those assumptions, we have very conservative growth, not at a high percentage increase from year to year, but that's just because of those indicators that we determined in the previous slide. On the expense, so when we come up with our expenses, what do we use? How do we grow those expenses? So we originally started with the town operating budget increase, we said 4%. And that covers the contracts, salaries, and other expenses. And on the school side, and we went to 5%. Let me just put a little note to 5% that we went to with the school, and looking at what the superintendent and school committee did during the pandemic is really to keep your ask at a minimum. If anything, it really bailed the town out. So, when we were looking at that, it was time to make sure the school was recognized for the commitment that they made during the pandemic, and we truly appreciated that. So we wanted to increase that to a 5%. We had some other charges, and
then we went ahead and asked for 6.
well, that's
We have
actually 7. We won't talk about that.
Yes.
But that's okay. That's all right. So with that, what happens when we went back out? And so this is a 5-year expense forecast, and again, it shows, it won't show on the screen, but it showed the let's see, $1 million in FY 24, and it goes up.
The shortfall.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so our analysis, next steps. So just to let you know what happened since that time. So we sent out the budget request to the school as well as all the other town departments. And those requests came in, and we ended up, yes, the 7% ask on the school, which created a $1.7 million structural deficit. Obviously, we can't go forward with that. So I met with the superintendent as well as all the other departments and asked that everybody has to do a little bit better to get to a more manageable number. And we did have some unknown variables, what was going to be local aid, what our healthcare costs were going to be. We project an 8% increase in healthcare, and the number came at 6.5%, but other expenses increased too. So we had to go back, and I asked the superintendent if he could get that number down. I would have liked 5. I settled with 6 with him, and we appreciated that. That is always working with us. So that meant, on the town side, I think the superintendent and Steve mentioned that was a $330,000. 320. So, of that 1.7, that meant on the town side, I made a lot more cuts. So that's where we are, and when we looked at our expenses into the future, let's slide off. Can we look back? This will work right now.
Where,
That one. So the expenses, so when we look at those projected deficits that we have in each of those years, keep in mind that the assumption for the school growth was at 5%. So, I obviously heard the conversation with the bus contracts, and Steve and I do talk and superintendent quite frequently. There's not a lot of money in the future years. I expect next year to be equally as difficult as this year, and we're going to be going through the same exercise. So, and I can't say that I would produce a budget guaranteeing the school a 6% growth, because as this town continues to grow, and we all know it is growing, there's a demand for other services in town, and that's police, and that's fire, and that's highway and DPW and town hall staff. Because as we increase those entities, and there's a support staff in a core building that have to support all of you. And that puts a lot on staff, and we haven't been able to really increase staff on the town side. But again, the last couple of years, I think really built the school, really built the town out. So we wanted to pay, reward them and show them the appreciation for what they did. There's not much in the other slides. That's really the gist of it, but I'm happy to answer questions.
I just have one question right now on the slide that you're on. So maybe off the top of your head, what is that, the triggering event on the debt service calculation from fiscal year 26 to 27, where we're trending positively and in terms of the debt service reducing year over year because we're paying it down, and then another project must come online? What is that project?
The senior center will come online.
So that's the forecast for the debt service to cover the
Debt
senior
service
center.
goes to the center.
So that's the first year in which we have debt service for the senior center?
Yeah, we'll have some short-term, we call them bands,
Yeah.
that will carry us over, but the project is expected to wrap, and that's when we would bond that and
Okay.
anything else that we have at that point in time. Obviously, now Indian Hill would, there'd be a little piece of that would increase that too.
do you mind if I ask a question? Does this factor in a potential Shaker Lane project? We don't know where that's gonna go, obviously, yet, but
No.
has that been
no,
factored in
no.
yet?
I think we all know that a Shaker Lane project will have to be a debt exclusion. There is absolutely no way that we can get done under the levy. So, and I think that we know that. I think the superintendent and Steve, we've all talked about that. We just, a school building project, and happy to sit on that committee with the superintendent, that could be anywhere. God knows.
30 to 60, we don't know.
Easy, just keep in mind with the price of construction right now, even for the senior center, that it's jumped up considerably from when we started. If the school is under 50 million, I'd be shocked. Especially when we're talking, 3 to 5 years down the road. So we're probably looking at closer to 60 mark.
We're seeing $100 million high schools go up all around.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we just couldn't absorb that expense.
That's really Stacy's problem, not.
It's good to know.
Stacy's got it. I'm not worried about that.
Thanks, bro. That's that much for you.
Yeah, right.
Trust their leadership.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question again? Part of this is trying to figure out what best practices are. And I noticed that you're talking about the town's conservative fiscal policies have served us well. It's not the same thing. The school choice fund isn't the same thing, but I do notice that the undesignated fund balance at 5% is kind of our policy. Is that? I'm trying to figure out what guidance for us as we're making decisions about maybe drawing down that fund.
So sure. So we, that helps really our free cash. And what does free cash help do is it funds the capital projects. So, I didn't even talk about the capital budget, but this year we had $9 million in capital budget requests, of which we funded about 1.7, I believe it is. And probably about 80% of that was the schools.
Thank you.
A roof,
And a roof and, you know.
not the whole roof.
So, but we obviously couldn't fund
Right.
the school roof. There's a process we have to do, a Mass General Law, Chapter 149. We have to do the feasibility study first. So that's step one, and we did fund that to do the roof. And hopefully that helps us determine, you know, do we have a little bit more life that can be an MSBA project, and we can get to 50% or 48% or whatever the match could be on that. That would be great, because that's gonna help, you know, debt service down the road as that continues to increase, or that undesignated fund balance that we throw into the capital stabilization that we pull from that, however way that we fund that project when it comes up.
Can I ask a question too? I'm still just learning this process here. So the school department appropriation, is that kind of the line items that Steve just presented to us, like the bus, salaries, all of that stuff? What is
We
it?
don't get involved in how the school spends their money.
Yeah.
What we just do is say, here's the
Just give it
dollar
to us.
amount, and how you spend it is up to the superintendent and the school committee to figure that out.
Okay,
The,
okay,
the appropriated budget is the budget that we put forward to the town by law. There are other areas of revenue that we have. Circuit
Essentially just the
breaker,
taxpayer
school choice.
portion of the budget.
but thank you for clarifying. That helps me understand kind of where the money, how the money flows. It's kind of up to us to cover it where we need it to. And you guys just give us that. And it's a 5% increase every year. That's kind of what you guys
That's what
try to.
That's what we use as a projection to see, what will that take us to the next 5 years? If we stay with the 5 and 4 approach, and that's the structural deficit that we came up with.
But that 5% is not guaranteed.
So 5% is not
Exactly.
guaranteed.
No, it's not guaranteed. Every year it's gonna change, you know, it's. I'm looking forward to a shovel in the ground at 550 King Street, probably as much as everybody, because that's gonna help generate hopefully some new taxes, and maybe
Right.
that moves the needle on some of this, but
Yeah.
until that happens, it doesn't happen.
Well, that was my next question. So, I mean, FY 29, so hopefully that's gonna be, that project will already be underway by 2029. Well, hopefully be revenue generating,
But starting
right?
next, yes, yeah. next
Hopefully.
fiscal year, yeah.
Because as of right now, that the increase during those years when we're probably gonna start seeing a big influx in infrastructure changes for the school. That increase from like 2028 to 2029, from 29 million to 30 million, it's not a very big increase for us, but we may be seeing a lot of really big expenses during those years. So what can we do to start to prepare for that if we do start seeing a big influx of, I mean, even just our buses right now, they're 30% more than we expected them, or half of what we expected.
You know,
them
as
to
we
be.
continue to monitor, you know, building permits and so forth, and as construction projects start around town, you know, we have a lot of exciting things that can happen. We then will change this forecast, and maybe we may look at a different new growth number based on what we project the project to be. Right now, nothing started, so we really
Right.
can't count on it.
Right.
So, you know, I'm hopeful that project and triggers a higher new growth. Maybe Governor Healy gives us a little extra local aid down the road in the future years. Then that's going to switch this model around, and you know, hopefully it shrinks our structural deficit. Maybe it makes it go away. Maybe we have a surplus. You know, I doubt the surplus, but it'd be nice.
Schools.
Well, so going back to the building schools, the way I'm reading this is that just because we know something's gonna happen at 550 King Street, when we're projecting growth for the building the school, we can't until the contracts are signed and the shovels in the ground. You can know it's gonna happen, but you can't document it's gonna happen. And so I think we all assume there's gonna be a project there that may produce tax revenue, may also produce students for schools. But the budget doesn't reflect that yet because
Right.
the contracts aren't signed.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Right, and hopefully we're gonna get some of that data. You know, we like to know what's gonna be the impact of that development on town services as well as the schools. So I think that will flush itself out more during the permitting process of the planning board. So, you know, hopefully that tells a little clearer story for us.
Would it help if the school committee weighed in on the height of the buildings?
We have that meeting again?
Lights off.
Just a follow-up comment. We're not self-funding the Schcmte school. We will receive a subsidy from the state. Their evaluation differs from year to year, but right now, if I remember, Steve, we're in the mid to high 40% reimbursement at this point.
Somewhere in there.
So which
So
is
we
significant.
just have to make up that difference is that the
Right.
town has to
Right.
make up. So we're gonna get partial funds and then we're gonna come to your office and say, what else can we have? Is that how the process?
Yes.
Well, it has to be voted and
Has to be voted.
Has to be voted.
It'll have to be, there'll be
Yeah.
a town meeting, it's a two-step process. You have an article that the town meeting would vote to do a debt exclusion, that it would have to go on the ballot. And the voters would get the,
So they have to vote on whether to take the debt.
yeah, it's two-step.
So we, I guess my question for you is the 550 King Street project. So we all spend a lot of time thinking about it, but as everybody knows, as a resident, it's like, it's difficult to keep track of everything that's happening in town. You're at all those select board meetings. So when do you estimate that a shovel goes in the ground? What is the actual first phase of the project? Like how many residential units? Is there a retail component to the first phase? Has anything been formalized, approved, ready to go?
permits,
No permits issued?
Nothing issued yet, but keep in mind that, the light and water department is starting to get bids in on the sewer project, and that project in itself, I think that they're projected to be about a 2-year project. So, and anything that he puts there is reliant upon sewer, so. That's why I'm really concerned for the next couple of fiscal years that we're really, it's gonna still be tight for us.
3-4 years out, we'll see impact, but not built.
Right, we're all hoping that 3-4 years out, that we see some impact, right? Because ultimately, you are all paying more in property taxes now because of the revenue that we lost when IBM moved out. We lost somewhere in the vicinity of $900,000 in revenue, which ended up going on your tax bills, so $130, $140 a year. So we'd like to shift that burden off of the residents as much as we can. So.
That's really helpful for us to know, though, as we're thinking about impact on schools and we're thinking about kindergarten class sizes, things like that. There's no reason for us to expect 100 X number of new families on King Street or anything for years and years. Gotcha. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
And so I'm happy to come back anytime, Kelly, just with the superintendent, if you have any questions, and certainly we do work closely as things progressing down. Superintendent and I meet quite often and to go through this, so we'll keep them informed.
Can I just ask for one I'm pretty sure I heard you clearly, but I just want to make sure we all did. Your kind of comment based on our school bus conversation was you can't count on necessarily the town being able to fund increasing appropriations, kind of escalating appropriations over the year, kind of cover shortfalls, right?
For the next couple of years anyways, yeah, we're 5% on the school side, 4% on the town side creates that structural deficit. So, I heard Steve say that, he'd asked the town to try to make that up. I couldn't guarantee that he'd be able to do that.
So, but as we're thinking about things and thinking about our internal budgets, if the big pot of money comes to the schools, how we allocate some of that money or decisions we make about how to spend that money, assuming they're 4 or 5% growth, maybe we'd have to find room within that budget to fund the extra. That's
your business right there.
Yeah.
Schools.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Right.
Thanks, Anthony.
You will see. New business item number 6. FinCom School Committee Representative Term Expiration Notification. Per policy AFC, Superintendent Kelly Clenchey will notify current FinCom member Tyler Gray that he may reapply for an additional term if interested. The term expiration date is May 8th, 2023. Here to elaborate or explain?
Everything's in the package. Letter's been sent. Tyler's been notified, and then we need to advertise it. And in prior to the end of Tyler's term, we will look at applicants and make a decision on the applicants to apply as to who we would like to represent us at FinCom level.
So we notify people by posted on the town website or?
It has to also go in the newspapers.
Okay.
So it's a requirement.
Gotcha. Great.
So,
Any other questions on that?
Tyler serves as the FinCom chair right now, doesn't he?
He does, yes.
Our appointment is well represented on the finance committee.
Very true.
Hopefully he's interested in continuing to serve. All right, that's great. Get that into the minutes of the meeting, and that's, as Dorothy said, that's underway. No further discussion on that or comments?
I'm good.
Perfect. All right, old business item number 1, this is just a placeholder on the agenda. So just notifying the general public that discussions regarding the potential removal of religious holidays from the school calendar are scheduled to take place at next meeting because we anticipated some absences at this meeting. So we'll continue that then. And number 2, somewhat of a related topic based upon the previous conversation. So the MSBA enrollment letter and certification, MSBA request to certify the enrollment for the Shaker Lane building project. Information's in the packet. We've all had a chance to review it, but would like to invite Dr. Clenchey to speak to it.
Sure. When we were completing the first phase of the project with MSBA, we had a lot of information to create and send up to them. The algorithms that they use, in my experience, have been pretty tried and true. The enrollment projections, they just use K-2. They don't include pre-K. They will do that during the feasibility study stage, and their enrollment projections were very, very close to our enrollment projections during the time. We were on a deviation of 13 students, which is minimal. So after reviewing the data, looking at the data again, and I guess my impression of what they presented is fair and reasonable. It does indicate an increase in the number of students. They are fully aware from our conversations that would most likely be actualized into 1 extra classroom per grade, plus potential specialty areas that are required as a result of that. That really is teased out during the feasibility phase of the study. Before we can proceed and apply to go to the next phase of the feasibility study, we need to sign a declaration that we're aware of the projected attendance or enrollment work correctly, and agree with the data that they've taken a look at. We exhausted everything that we could give them, including student enrollments in surrounding communities that have apartment buildings, etc. So we gave them as much as we could.
Is that anticipation of perhaps the 550 or just like?
Well, because we do have a couple of apartment buildings in town, and there most likely will be more apartment buildings in the future. It was kind of nice to try to figure out what that actually means, and to be quite transparent with you, there are no patterns that one can determine when we look at the information. But it was important that they had that additional information, for the future. But as you all pointed out, they can only go on what's in existence at this point in time, and they can't go beyond that. So I was actually really impressed with our conversation. One of my concerns as a superintendent is when you look at older buildings and you look at the design of newer buildings, it usually means less per square footage per student. And from what I can tell from our conversations and what they've done, we should be okay, given the information we have.
So my understanding from the letter is that we were basically suggesting that we build a school to accommodate 507 students. And our current enrollment is 436.
Right.
They're suggesting to us that our enrollment is likely going to average not 436, but 400 over the next 10 years. So they're anticipating a decline. And we know we've got major projects coming on board in the next few years. And in the end, they're recommending a school for 435 students, which is essentially what we have now.
But well, let's backtrack just a bit. The 507 included pre-K.
Okay,
Their
so let's
letter
that in
is
the comment.
K
So
two.
we're at 436 now.
Right.
I thought the 507 was
including-
was the district's proposal.
But it included pre-K.
And included, I think it includes.
They're only looking at K2. They don't
Yeah.
include pre-K.
Okay, so the 436 number also includes pre-K.
We're at right now 382 without pre-K.
So,
Okay, so it's really 382 versus
435.
435. So there is some room there.
Yeah, 53 additional students.
in pre-K.
No,
Total, like
in
a
K2.
12%
Pre-K
increase or
is unknown
something.
at this point in time. They don't, for some reason, they, to my knowledge, never have included pre-K in this preliminary phase. They take a look at that during the feasibility phase of the project. So we will be funded for pre-K in terms of classrooms.
Right,
We
they just don't.
want to make sure you understand that. They just wait until the feasibility study stage of the process.
So K to 2, apples to apples, they're actually suggesting that we build a school for a 13% increase above current enrollment.
Right.
Roughly 50 students spread across
Right.
3 grades.
Yeah.
And we feel good about that.
That sounds much
Good
better.
about
The
that.
explanation.
Yeah, I
that-
don't, yeah, I
I
don't,
feel real good about
Yeah,
yeah, I didn't see,
it. Don't you see?
I didn't follow that 13% increase. It makes sense with what I had been trying to calculate, but I don't see how that.
Well, the 435 number is just K to 2.
Yeah.
And Kelly's enrollment figure for K to 2 is 382.
Our current is 382 to
Correct.
435.
So it's 382 versus as compared to 435.
But doesn't it say here that our K-2 is actually 436 right now?
With pre-K,
That's our
Oh, it's
total.
pre-K,
Pre-K.
okay.
pre-K included.
Okay.
That's the variable that
That's
needs to be
that variable
removed that kind of makes this all of a sudden make sense.
All of a sudden. Okay.
Yeah, because without it didn't
Okay.
seem to be. So yeah, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I mean, I still have, well, now to kind of now I kind of have to review it again, because when I originally saw it, I was like Justin had said, it seems like we were at a certain number this year, and 10 years from now, they're anticipating generally the same number, but now it's a little bit different. So it's
One extra classroom per
So it's one extra classroom per grade in Shaker Lane, considering just the King Street. Okay,
Well, this doesn't consider King Street at
No,
all.
they
This
can't
is-
consider.
They can't.
it at this
talk
point
about
in
it.
time.
right.
This is just projecting. In fact,
so this is just like a normal growth for us.
They take a look at previous growth over time. They analyze building permits in the town over time and use a number of factors and projected what our enrollment would be based on a number of factors.
Okay.
Like,
So
You know,
they
train
adjust a
station,
couple of
3
potential
exits in the
impacts.
town, like there's a lot going on in this.
Yeah, they did I think a good job, or a great job of taking into account everything that we could give them.
so my read of this is, I don't know, right? But if our projections, your projections with your experiences roughly match their experience, their projections, and it seems like a 13 to 15% increase over 10 years, that seems right.
Yeah.
50 students, an extra 50 students, it all just feels right with it, since I don't have the expertise in the modeling that y'all have.
Right.
So do we need to sign this? Is that what? Okay.
I would recommend, I mean, there's always an option when you build a new school to add things, but 100% of that cost is borne by the taxpayer in town. So they're not, the fact that they actually agree that we're growing was a real good thing,
Mm.
because that's not typically the case. Because in most communities, you look at your graduation rates and comparing to the number of students that are coming into your district, there's a net loss. So I feel really good about this analysis, to be honest with you. We'll see what the future brings, but just the fact that there's an acknowledgement of one extra classroom per grade as we start looking to the future in our community and schools. If the patterns are consistent, then we're going to be looking at additional classrooms at Russell Street School at some point in time. That is the Russell Street School is the most recent renovation that we have in this community, and then we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? Does it mean 3 classrooms plus specialty classrooms? Are we going to be eligible for a subsidy at that point in time? There are no guarantees. So as we vision as a school committee and administrative team, these are some of the things we need to take into account. The fact that the acknowledged growth means that there's a real good chance that we're going to see growth. And we need to start preparing for that growth through all of our schools during a period of time.
Without belaboring this conversation too long, is there room to absorb growth within our current footprints at the high school, at the middle school, at Russell Street?
We're pretty well close to capacity.
Okay,
That's point in time. Not a lot of wiggle room.
I'm glad we have Stacy to solve this for us.
My brain's kind of not saying no. So I have,
You can increase class size.
I have a few questions. I think it's great that they've included the additional 50 students. I think that's good too. Like you said, that's really good. They've acknowledged that that's just going to be kind of our general growth. But within the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, our population is going to increase by 20%. Just from this King Street. And I know that they can't include that into their calculations, but we as a committee can. Is that right?
You
plan
can,
for it.
but if you wanted to actualize that in terms of building size, that would be beyond what MSBA would fund.
So we would have to fund the difference.
100%.
Correct.
Right. So if we can work to figure out potentially what that difference would be, because I think can we all agree that 50 students, an additional classroom per grade, just our general growth, that's a great improvement that MSBA is acknowledging that, but it's not acknowledging that we are going to be increasing by 20% in the next 5 to 8 years. It's usually a 10% increase, and now we're going to a 20% increase.
Maybe. And we also have to take into account that we have 90 something school choice students. And as we grow, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? We may not be able to continue with school choice, or we may be able to at a lower number.
Right.
So that goes into speculation as well.
Right.
Yeah. So without school choice, we would have 94 students less than those students.
Which we just said we're really relying on these school choice kids to come in through kindergarten, this new Shaker Lane building to continue to flush us.
Right.
So as we're potentially taking away spots, we also need to maintain, if not increase those spots. So there's a lot of conflicting objectives here. I feel like that.
Yeah,
it has to be fleshed out at some point.
Yeah, those are tough.
Sooner rather than later, I think.
I mean, in some communities, there comes a point in time where they cannot continue with school choice because it's not advantageous in terms of cost. I mean, there are surrounding communities that have done that. So, but I mean, for years, we've been talking at the school committee level about being less reliant on those funds, building more into our operational budget so that we won't be as dependent in the next 10 years, for example. But we've never been able to do that. But during COVID, we through budgeting processes and ESSER funds, et cetera, and a decrease in number of out-of-district students and an actual decrease in our special education population. We've been able to create a balance that allows us great flexibility. And as we move forward, we need to figure out how we're we're gonna be good stewards of that money, and so that it lasts as long as it can. And also takes care of our increased staffing needs. And we, with special education on district placements, there's never a linear pattern. It's up and down all the time, so. I mean, we're in a good spot. In part of my career, I've had the experience of having to downsize because of decreased populations. I would much rather be in a situation of making decisions where we're growing than having to downsize.
Growth is good,
Right.
absolutely, fast growth,
What
we have
goes
to
up
brace ourselves for.
must come down. So, you can ride out this growth but someone's gonna have to deal with the decline on the other end.
Right.
Might not be any of us.
It's gonna be good. So I feel as though that it's a deeper discussion in regards, since King Street isn't involved in the MSBA, and I said signing the MSBA is something we have to do now. I think the deadline is March 28th. Is that
15th.
something we just need to put a check mark on and
We-
say, yes, we
We
agree
do,
with this?
because we can't apply for the next phase until we've done that.
Right.
And in
So-
all likelihood, MSBA is not gonna revise their numbers if we gave them additional data. They would say, this is what it is.
Yeah. So with that, these are two separate issues, but how do we move forward with kind of the bigger picture planning? Because I think. Do you guys have a good feel for what's coming for King Street and what the patterns are? Because we have a lot of data, because we have a few of the apartment buildings and condo buildings that have been in the neighboring communities to kind of set precedent or give us a good example of what we could have coming down the pipeline. But if you guys don't have a good feel for what that could be, there's kind of no sense of urgency to figure it out.
Well, there's a lot of unknown at this point in time and speculation until the town has building permits in place, or let's backtrack until the town approves what they present. I mean, there are no guarantees at this point in time. And I mean, our economy is okay. I'm not going to say it's great at this point in time beyond Littleton. So we don't know what's going to happen at this point in time. I'm very optimistic. I'd love to see that development go, but we don't have enough information.
Can I ask a clarifying question, just to make sure I understand the kind of state of play, is that, and that's, BA has said they're estimating 430 students. And at some point, we hope will reimburse us a certain percentage of building to the capacity, right?
Right.
If over the next couple of years of planning, or whatever it is it takes, we decide as a school committee, as a town, that we need to accommodate the bigger building, we can always add onto that, but that's a $1-to-1 dollar spent by the town.
Correct.
Their offer's not gonna change. We just need to accept it or
That's correct.
reject it.
Right.
So I will say,
That's
I will
correct.
move that we sign this letter and we accept it. And then we continue the conversations as we get more real data about how many units, families.
Yeah, and-
You seem to know a lot about this.
Some data, which I wanted to share it with these guys, because I think it's important for you guys to really see what the picture it is. So right now for the King Street Common, they've already applied for a distribution of their units, I believe. So they have an application that is already on the
So that's public record, yeah.
So that's, there's gonna be, 780 units. There's 468 one-bedroom units. I think we can assume that we aren't gonna get any students from those.
Like you say,
Potentially.
Yeah.
There's, for the two-bedroom units, there's 234 two-bedroom units. And then there's actually 78 three-bedroom units. So from some of we got, I think, 4 or 5 data points from different apartment buildings and condo buildings around them. And when I was looking at them, there were 2 that stuck out because they were very similar distribution of those units. So this King Street is 10% of these units are going to be 3-bedroom and the rest is 1 and 2. So for the Littleton Village Green Apartments, the one over by Acton.
Yeah.
So that has a similar distribution. So that has 8% 3-bedroom apartments.
Mhm.
And then 46% 1-bedroom and 46% 2-bedroom.
Similar scale.
No, so they are only 144 units.
That's much smaller. Okay.
And they have added 50 students to their school since those have been completed, which is totally doable, but we are going
That's
to
for
be, we're going to be 4
13,
times
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna be 4 times that. And then Avalon, which we just got, was one that was really compelling to me because it is, that's also 10%, 3-bedroom,
Mhm.
46%, 1 and 2. So it's very comparable to kind of what we're doing when it comes to the 3-bedroom. And they had 180 students
For a similar number
for
of units.
368 units. So
Half the
half
units.
of what we potentially have coming. Does that make sense?
Did how many kids?
181,
Double that.
So double
Could be
that. So that's
360.
200.
Yeah.
200 kids.
Yeah.
So that's 200 kids divided by 12. I don't know how you normally kind of figure that out if you divide it by 12 grades and just say that's the average increase. But
It's pretty hard to do it any other way. I mean,
Right.
it's a,
so that right there is another extra class size.
Right.
16 kids. That's another class size on top of what we already have, which is already an additional class size for all of the school, for all of the grades. So we can kind of estimate that it could be between a 1 and 2. It's definitely a 1. It could be an additional classroom per grade, just with this unit alone within that 8-year period that these houses are going to be built and sold. And the people that are moving into these houses are going to be the seniors and empty nesters that are also putting their houses on the market in Littleton for new families that are coming in. So regardless of whether these condos are bringing in kids, the houses that are going up for sale are going to be bringing in kids.
I think that's a really good point because there's a big push in town for senior housing,
senior
which,
housing,
you know,
right.
is needed.
Right,
But for
right.
every senior that takes senior housing, it creates vacancy on a perfectly suitable house for a young family to move into. So
Kitchen's usually the update.
kitchen's bad, sure.
So I think that's just what I wanted to kind of present to you guys, kind of that big picture of what I see. And what is just something that's why I think there needs to be a really big discussion with select board and with Anthony and with Steve, for us to figure out how we're going to take this in, because this isn't going to be, it's not going to be over the next 15 years. The developers, they say they're going to take between 8 years, but at some point it's going to be a big influx of apartments condos at one time that are just going to be done. They're going to be done and they're going to be sold, and there's going to be kids knocking at our doors potentially.
and then the speed at which the developer builds is going to be dependent on how quickly they sell units.
Right.
as
And
well.
Yeah, and most of these are gonna be apartments anyways.
Right.
So it's leases.
Well, that's what all of these Avalons are.
Yeah,
They're all.
But we're using the
apartments,
term condos and sales, and that's
That's right.
not actually the
Really
case.
so, Yeah.
I think one of the things that we can do as a school committee is make sure that the select board, planning board, FinCom understands what we have as infrastructure with the schools and where our potential infrastructure is going to go with Shaker Lane, so that they can help guide policy as it relates to building permits and projects. Because we don't want them saying, you know, that, geez, we didn't know you couldn't handle this. You know, they should, if they're going to be making those decisions, they should be well informed.
So that'll be part of the discussions with the Shaker Lane Building Committee,
Mhm.
of which Anthony is a part of, the town finance director is a part of, superintendent's a part of. So,
But we just need to we haven't gotten together yet, right?
correct, we haven't, we're working with Ryan, the assistant town administrator, to try to find a date to do all that. And have that kickoff meeting.
Things will pick up.
But yeah, things start to pick
Substantially,
up.
if we're approved for the next day. Is it already started?
That's when the committee really gets involved in what the next step is.
Yeah, once we get that kind of budget approval,
Right.
and then we go into a feasibility study.
Right, once we're approved by MSBA to go into that feasibility study, that's when the Shaker Lane Building Committee will really get involved, because we'll have to hire an owner's project manager, architects and all that kind of stuff. And that's when you get into the exact discussion that
That's when we can
you just
kind
had.
of fold in this
Right.
other stuff.
Well, let me ask if this is appropriate, because that was so helpful. We've always heard it means growth, but the exact comps, the proportions, that was really, really helpful, and it's kind of information that we want to share. I don't know if we need it seems like right now we just need to act and to move forward with MSBA. I don't know if we need a motion for that or not, but then the next stage is we want to make sure we can claim that money for help, let them help pay for what they'll help pay for. But then we need to have a larger conversation about what do we actually need. So I look forward to having that conversation, or y'all having that conversation, but for now, do we need a motion to sign this?
Well, we need, what I'd like this evening is two motions, one to support the signing of the document and the second motion to designate Justin McCarthy as the signing individual for documents that need to be signed moving forward.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, usually the documents are signed by three individuals. It'll be Justin, if he's the
Sure.
signing authority, town administrator, and superintendent.
Well, I'll make the first motion then. I move that the school committee authorize you or
Authorize Justin.
authorize Justin
Part of the funds.
to sign the you said two motions. One to sign the MSBA letter of improvement, the design enrollment certification.
Yep.
And if we pass that, then I'll make a second motion that we designate Justin as our duly authorized representative moving forward.
There were two motions on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Perfect. Motion made by Mr. Austin and seconded by Mr. Marius. There's no discussion from me. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous.
Was that for one or for both?
That was for both.
Okay.
Okay. So I've just gone ahead and sign that and get you the copy of the meeting. This is now our second opportunity for interested citizens. We're just had past scheduled 8:30 time for that.
Well,
Hearing and seeing none. We'll move on to subcommittee reports. I feel like we've touched on a lot of subcommittee topics this evening, so if committees don't have something substantial to report, it's perfectly okay to take a pass tonight. We're back next week.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick update, just for 2 seconds on the high school roof. We did go out to bid, we opened the bids. PNBC, I missed the last meeting, but I believe they were in the process of approving and authorizing the contract for the high school partial roof replacement, so that will happen this summer. Yeah.
Perfect. Anything additional from
No, that's
PBC?
it. That's what I had to, so.
Perfect. Budget subcommittee report. I can report that the budget subcommittee's head is likely spinning based upon the bus bid information, the 2-tier versus 3-tier, the potential impacts of our negotiations with the LEA. So it's been busy and it's going to continue to be busy, and we will keep folks informed as potential decisions are made, but I missed last school committee meeting, and we haven't met with the LEA in a couple weeks, so.
A lot of numbers getting floated around.
What's that?
A lot of numbers getting floated around.
Yeah. Policy subcommittee.
no update.
So on that same line, I would just like to revisit JHA as it relates to the religious holidays. At some point in time in the near future. I'm not sure if we updated it with the inclusion of the volley last year, or if we just don't have it up on the website.
I think we did.
The one on the website doesn't seem to list it, so I'd like to get that updated on the website. And then I think we need to look at the language that's in there as it relates to some of the feedback we've heard from the community about students' challenges with missing school, missing sports, missing practices, penalties that we've heard about. So I'd like to just have that on the agenda at some point in the near future. Yes. It is?
I did it in February.
Oh, like just last month?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there a CPAC update?
There, just that we had a really productive meeting. What night was that? This week?
Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday. Was it yesterday?
No, it was snow day, Tuesday.
It was Tuesday, really productive meeting, a lot of good ideas, and want to thank Lynn for already responding to some of our questions. Elections are coming up, but I think will be officially announced maybe in April. And then elections will happen in June. Just encourage people to reach out to their liaisons and to be as active as you can be.
Okay, seeing no other business on the agenda, I'll just make note that next meeting is scheduled for March 9th. Same time, same place. Lots of discussion anticipated for that meeting and some potential votes. And then just for the public's record, the formal presentation for the public budget hearing is scheduled for March 16th. So without any further ado, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. Austin,
I'd like to second that.
seconded by Mr. Marius. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, we are adjourned.
Thank you.